do you know how to engage your core? So we have 3 different levels of our core. We've got our deep core, which is called a transverse abdominis, which wraps from your spine all the way around your belly, kind of like a corset. And that's in charge of just supporting us. So when we cough, when we sneeze, that muscle activates. We also have our rectus abdominis, our 6-pack down the middle, that's in charge of all of our flexion, so crunching. And then our obliques, which are our side muscles, that's in charge of our rotation and lateral movement. So when we get really strong in our external muscles, our 6-pack and our obliques, we tend to forget about training that deep core. And that deep core doesn't actually facilitate our movement. That is our stability muscle, and it's really important that that's strong, especially after having children. We quite often get abdominal separation, and that transverse abdominis gets really weak, which can cause a lot of issues. So I'm going to take you through some little tips and tricks to activate that deep core and to get nice and strong and controlled. So we'll get you to lie down and place your feet hip distance apart and rest your head down onto the ground. So when you feel your hip bones and your pubic bone, it's like a little triangle shape, you want them to all be at the same level as one another. And when they're level, so if you were to put a wine glass there, it would be nice and flat on the bony structures, then there would be a natural arch under your lower back. So this is considered a neutral spine. So when we're in our neutral spine and we add on movement to it, that transverse abdominis is forced to switch on to help stabilize so we don't rock through the pelvis. So pelvic tilts is a really beautiful way to actually strengthen it when you're doing it on its own. So if you pull your pelvic floor, that feeling like you're trying to stop yourself from peeing, pull that up really, really tight, and then put your fingers on your lower belly, just in the inside of the hip bones. You'll feel it push up on your fingers. So that's a sign that you've activated that muscle because it's connected to the pelvic floor. The same thing when you breathe forcefully out the mouth, like you're blowing out a candle, which is our Pilates breath, that also switches on that deep core. So this is why we talk a lot about the core canister. Your breath is your diaphragm at the top, the bottom is your pelvic floor, and then you've got that transverse abdominis that wraps all the way around. In Pilates, we always talk about that breath to be able to facilitate that core canister. So to try and activate all of that now, pull up on the pelvic floor, not to 100% because we can't hold it there for very long, just about 20 or 30%, and then we'll keep everything nice and still. We're going to slide a heel out, making sure there's no movement in the lower back, and then slide it back in. And what I want you to feel is kind of like this firmness. It's not like a full squeeze like when we're doing a crunch. So you can't really see my legs, but just roll with me. So it's sliding out, keeping that firmness, no movement in the lower back, the pelvic floor humming a little bit, and keeping the hips from rocking from side to side, keep them level. So this is a great base exercise to repair your transverse abdominis, especially if you've got that abdominal separation in the middle here. And then to add on crunches, which I don't recommend if you do have abdominal separation wider than 2 fingers, then you don't want to do crunches until that's repaired. Otherwise, we interlace the fingers, place it behind the head and have your thumbs down both sides of the neck. And when you come into a crunch position, try not to lose that neutral spine. So what we usually do when we crunch is we tuck under and your pubic bone lifts. This isn't necessarily wrong because you're going to feel your 6-pack more doing it this way. But to get that transverse abdominis activated and to get that alignment, we want to try and keep it neutral. It's going to feel different. So you're going to feel it in your lower belly more. You're still going to feel it here as well, but not quite as much. So our breath, we add in the breath as well. So a little pelvic floor lift. We exhale, inhale, release. Okay, so you can give that a go, see how it feels. When you're ready to add on more load, once you've got that control, then we come into our imprint. So that's where you push your lower back into the ground, to lift the legs, and it gives you that extra support to be able to hold the weight of the legs. So now we don't want a neutral spine. You can do it in a neutral spine if you're incredibly strong, but if you have any back issues, it's best to stay here. And then we add in from here little toe taps or leg extensions all the way out long. The longer you go, the more load you're going to add to that lower back into your core. So you want to keep feeling that wrapping feeling, that little humming of the pelvic floor, being able to connect to your breath. If you start to lose all of that, bring your legs down, reset, come back into it with really good form, because you're going to get so much more out of it. I hope that helped.